Don't look now, but it's a whole new world of weed out there. Pot is flower, it's Bruce Banner and Blue Dream. You've got bongs and dabs, resin and shatter, vaping and edibles, new terms, new strains, and new ways to use cannabis sativa, the plant. Some just made with CBD, and hemp has minimal THC. There's sativa and indica strains, and 100 chemicals, all legal in 10 states for adult use. There's a lot to get to know. Get used to it, folks, because it's legal in the Bay State and it's not going away. Neither is In the Weeds with Jimmy Young next. Revolutionary Clinics is just one of 49 medical cannabis dispensaries in Massachusetts, but there's a reason why it's one of the most popular. It's their patient-first philosophy. All day long, they teach, they educate, they communicate about this complicated plant called cannabis sativa. That's true whether you visit their Cambridge location in Fresh Pond at 110 Fawcett Street or at 67 Broadway in Somerville. Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first. Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Today, joined by a very special guest in studio. His name is Curt Dalton. His company is cannabis.net. He's from Middleton, Massachusetts, and he calls himself a web entrepreneur. Did I get it right the second time?
Absolutely, yes.
Funny how that works, right? Curt, thanks so much for coming down today and buying me lunch, by the way. I maybe go right on record here.
You're lucky to have me. That's all I can say, Jimmy.
That's what I do believe that. Believe me, I'm very happy to be here, as you are. Anyway, you have been doing this cannabis.net website now for 3.5 years. Tell me how it all started and why you did it.
Sure. I was working in the internet field doing a data analytics project. I saw the domain cannabis.net come up for auction.
What year was this?
2016,
okay.
Maybe the end of 2015.
Yeah.
At that point, I knew the guys over at Weed Maps owned marijuana.com and net, and I know cannabis.com was kind of, I believe, in their portfolio. So I realized this was going to be the only exact match domain that would ever come for sale in my lifetime for less than $500 million at this point. So I got the URL. It's funny, a guy...
Dare I ask how much it cost you?
It was not cheap, but it wasn't in that range. That's
okay,
for sure.
Fair enough.
And it was a British photographer had owned it for about 20 years and hadn't done much with it. And he had just had a picture of a Wheaties box with a pot leaf over it for 20 years. But it had built up organic strength and it had a domain age to it that Google likes. So after looking at the industry and realizing it's going to be a long time until you can buy ads, I realized this was going to be a click and a traffic. You better throw a really wide net out there. So we developed it to kind of be the one-stop shop for cannabis fans. So we do full mapping for all cannabis businesses, not just doctors and dispensaries, but like, say, lawyers, edible companies, people who are doing real estate. They can be on a map. We do full news and blogging every day as well, 7 days a week. We put in a social feed, kind of like the Facebook of weed. We didn't design our site around it. We did it for Google Love, to bring people back to the site, to affect bounce rates, that kind of thing. We have a full cannabis job board. We realize cannabis jobs are going to be probably in demand and interesting in the future, and we wanted to start getting indexed and kind of a history. We also put up a cannabis events page where you can just put in your zip code, or if you're on our app, it just shows you, like, what are the events coming up around here? Not just the 6 big shows, but the actual, hey, is there a cooking class with cannabis coming up? Is there an educational program with CBD in Maine this weekend? So we have a full cannabis events page, and we do have a full, we call it the CBD Superstore, where we deal with about 12 different providers of high-quality CBD products. You can order CBD from us, and hopefully it's someday in the future with a law change, THC.
So it is on the CBD side, you can have multiple CBD products on that? Is that, or is it just one? Are they buying for the setting? Are they paying you for the right to be the only one? Anything like that going on?
No, we looked at this as being trying to set up a shop where someone could go and compare brands, because everything we saw out there was just they were working with one provider. So here's your Dove soap CBD. That's all we have. We said, well, why not let all the providers in, assuming they have lab testing and of high quality, and let people compare. So we have, I think, 11 suppliers right now that drop ship, but you can go and look at the different tinctures. You can go compare their salves, as opposed to, well, I got to go to this site to read about this one. So being more of an Amazon setup.
You're actually creating something that I think is a great idea, and I didn't know you before I wrote this business plan or started my company, but it's very similar to what we imagine and what we envision here at Pro Cannabis Media. That being said, we've already figured out that there's ways where the two of us could help each other. Since you've been already in the trenches, you understand the business for the last 3.5 years. And the TV side of things, where we are moving towards, is where my comfort zone is. And, I'm hoping that we get to play in the sandbox a little bit more than just this one podcast.
Oh, absolutely. And we saw video 3 years ago as having tremendous value. When you're creating content and you're creating text, 3 years ago, there were 50 people doing cannabis text. So I'll call that blog post articles. Now there's 300. And the high domain ranking sites, so you have your Globe, the Washington Post, Vox, Vice, all the way down the line, they have dedicated staffs now for cannabis. So it's hard to outrank with an article. Whereas people forget that YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world. Mm-hmm. It just happens to get bundled into the Google part. So there's tremendous value in making video for people. And that's kind of what the direction you guys are going is really smart. Now, of course, the video race will begin to where content is, as I like to call it, boobs and bongs, or just sitting at a desk with a lot of dab rigs and pipes. But then there's going to be kind of like the Netflix, what's going on? You're going to have better and better content. The bar will be raised on the video side, which is where you guys are going to do really well.
Thank you.
You'll be able to edit it. There'll be multi-camera shoots. There'll be reporters in different cities cutting in through Skype. So that's all coming. Right. And if you're ahead of that, you're going to be the guys that people go to.
Well, that'll be great. And it certainly gives me a sense of deadline pressure, too, I might add. And I appreciate that because I really do respond well to deadlines since I've been on deadlines my whole life, being in the television business. So we've had a couple of interesting conversations, but I want to start off because, we're both sports fans. We've established that, which is great. And absolutely, this is the greatest sports city in America, Boston. I mean, yes, another one of our teams is in a championship final. Again, yes, we're spoiled. Yes, we're arrogant, but we are loving it because if you're old enough, you paid your dues in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s.
There was a dry stretch.
Yes, there was a very large, and we're all great characters for that, right?
Yes.
So we talked about in sports the Mount Rushmore of sports. And in Boston, it's Orr and Ted Williams, and it's Tom Brady and Bill Russell, because Bill Russell still is the greatest winner of all time. You're nodding your head. You too bleed green, as do I.
Yes.
So let's move on to the cannabis space, shall we? Because I got to tell you, I don't want to say I'm new to the space, but let me rephrase that. I'm new to the space, but not new to the product. All right, I admit that. I've admitted that many times on my show.
It was tough times in the 70s. You had to get by somehow.
I had ADHD. Who knew it was a cure?
I had glaucoma.
There you go. We qualified for our medical cards before they even knew what they were. Who do you think? And I guess this is a national. This is certainly an American, because I don't know anybody in Amsterdam, right? But definitely in the United States. Who do you think are going to be who are the pioneers in this industry?
So as I like to call it, the Mount Rushmore of weed would be people with a big enough user reach and history in order to carry a brand. Because in the end, this is going to come down to branding. The actual cannabis plant will be packaged in different forms. The margins will compress when the federal law changes. There'll be an overabundance of cannabis in the world. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to sell your product? This is where the branding comes in. We used to call it the Oprah effect when she was in her heyday. Just get your product on Oprah and you can go retire. Right. Well, at some point, you couldn't even send Oprah your products. They had to find you. So there's certain people I call the Mount Rushmore of weed, and that would certainly be Snoop. He has a brand already, but with his reach and his history with cannabis, he is on the Mount Rushmore. Willie Nelson, certainly, again, same has his own brand, Willie's Reserve, plus his history.
And cover boy of the Weed magazine, the Rolling Stone, for this year, which at 86, I think he is.
Exactly. Right? So you know how mainstream we're getting. And certainly Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong fame. He's still very active on the cannabis side. Would be my Mount Rushmore of weed right now. On the business side, if there's a Mount Rushmore of business, you certainly have to look at someone like Steve D'Angelo out in California as really being a pioneer.
Who brands himself as the father of the cannabis industry. And I ran into him, Brush with Greatness, like David Letterman used to do. I ran into him at the NCIA lobby days a couple of weeks ago. And, as soon as I walked by him, I was like, okay, I know who you are, right? And he had just signed on with Green Flower, which is one of our affiliate partners on this little venture of ours.
Max Simon.
And Max has done a great job with that site. In fact, has a great online certificate course that I recommend to anybody who wants to learn about this new industry, just like Cannabis 101, if you will. It's priced right and available at Greenflower. And also, Sensi Magazine is one of my affiliate partners as well, along with Weed Maps, Leafly, and the MJ Headline News. So back to Steve. He's creating himself as a brand and as the father of cannabis. But I got to tell you, besides seeing him on videos and his self-proclaimed father of cannabis industry brand, I don't get it. What is his? Do you know what his background is at all?
Sure. Well, we're here in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
We're late to the party.
Right.
He's been literally involved with the legalization movement back when California has had legal medical cannabis since the mid-'80s for the HIV/AIDS epidemic in San Francisco. It was literally the only thing that could help these people in the streets. And Steve was involved with that. I believe Steve has also done federal time for cannabis cultivation and shipping as well. So he has walked the walk and talked the talk, not only among the early HIV/AIDS patients to help them, but also done time in prison. He's fought the federal government. I think it's settled before the Supreme Court on something to do with cannabis as well. I'd have to look it up. But that on the business, you may not know him because he's not in movies and he's not a rapper.
Right.
But as far as, guys you would tip your cap to at any time he walks by and say thank you, he would be one of them.
Well, I did say thank you, and then he said, please contact my people. And I said, sure, I'll have my people contact your people, and hopefully we'll get an opportunity to get him on the show at some point.
Sure.
We're here in our home state of Massachusetts. Did you ever think we'd be talking about cannabis as a legal commodity, as an adult use situation here where you can walk into a store over the age of 21 and walk out with weed? Did you ever think you'd see that in your lifetime?
I will say this. I didn't think I'd see it this quickly, and there are still so many people who, if you say, oh, I'm going to get a 6-pack or a bottle of wine or the mummy juice for the ladies who like to have a glass when the kids go down, totally fine. No one bats an eye. Everybody gives you a thumbs up. But as soon as you say, like, oh, I'm going to do cannabis or I'm going to smoke a joint, however you want to phrase it, oh, the eyeballs and the whispering and I don't know if you should do that. It's amazing where one actually harms the brain, the liver, the kidney, let alone what it does to families and relationships when someone gets addicted to alcohol. And then one is healthy. It's in the same. It's like eating broccoli and kale. It's in the same family. Yet the perception of 80 years of the stigma of prohibition. Again, you walk into a party, and again, we're in Massachusetts, not California, for the listeners who are like, what are you talking about? You can show up with a 6-pack or a bottle of scotch, and you're the hero. Again, you walk in, there'll be people just look the other way and maybe just not approve. It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable, and we're fighting it every day, and it's one of the most frustrating things being in the media side and being pro-cannabis. And, of course, we live our brand now. We are procannabismedia.com. And I say to myself many times that how are we going to move forward? How are we going to educate and undo 80 years of propaganda? And to me, I think the media, the traditional media here, is dropping the ball because the public service announcement exists for this very reason, to educate the public about something that can actually improve their lives. But because it is still that federal illegality, a lot of the stations that are controlled by national conglomerates do not want to take and accept advertising or even run a public service announcement. So to me, they are not serving the public with information. And every story that comes out is, oops, we didn't destroy this inert cannabis in our dumpster the right way. And that's the lead story on the news. I mean, they're looking for reasons for the industry to fail rather than looking at the industry from a respectful view and saying, look what they've accomplished.
I would say so on the national level, as long as the plant itself and some of its components are a Schedule I drug, you'll always have that group of conservative people. Generally, they tend to be conservatives who don't want legalization. And they watch TV too. And certain networks know I have more of a conservative base, so they want to see anti-pot stuff. We did a story at cannabis.net on, I look at what's the biggest pain point? What are people afraid of? And I think we called it, is medical marijuana the Trojan horse that people think? Because if you really try to get into the psyche of people who are so against it, they think we're tricking them. They think it's a mechanism that we're all going to get high and get stoned and you're going to make it legal and let us do it. That's their really greatest fear, is that it's a trick. Medical marijuana is an excuse to recreational, which is an excuse to we're all going to get stoned. We trick you. We got you to vote for it. So we try to talk about that, like the underlying fear of what makes them so against cannabis.
Right.
It's a plant. I mean, like I said, it's
right. And by the way,
it grows.
And it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and it's been used by, let's go back thousands of years when there has been a medicine man. Okay, the medicine man used cannabis to help with disease that he was faced with because they didn't have big pharma back then. Right?
So we did a story on the history, and I believe it's about 5,000 BC.
Yep.
China and Asian countries have hieroglyphics of the cannabis plant. It was used to help people and heal them, and they're even finding tombs now in Egypt and like Mongolia that have cannabis laid next to the sarcophagus.
So they're not getting buried with their bongs?
Yeah, no, there are no bongs back then, just the plant. I guess, the sativa, the CBD could come off in the air, but osmosis for the dead person. But yeah, I mean, there's a long history of medical use for this. And as you know, making it illegal. It was legal, and this is an interesting point, whenever the date was 80 years ago that they said, okay, let's put it on the Schedule 1 list.
So it was 1937.
37.
Okay, and it was the Controlled Substances Act back then.
Yes.
And that's what actually, I believe, formed the FDA.
Or the DEA.
The DEA, sorry. I knew it was one of those initial groups out of Washington, D.C.
But what I tell people who are kind of leery of is, look, on September 30th of 1937, you could go to your CVS and Walgreens and buy it. It was an oil. It was kind of a cure-all oil for a lot of things. And then at midnight it changed to be illegal. Did the plant change? Did anything happen? Did anybody drive their Model T Ford off the whatever the Tobin Bridge was back then? No. So again, it was legal for hundreds of years.
Right.
And then for political reasons and motivated for business to protect some industries.
Right.
Like politicians and greedy people made it illegal. There was no change in the plant. Nothing. It's like saying, hey, I can buy Pepto-Bismol today, but in 2 days, it's a schedule. You can't buy Pepto. Nothing changed in the formula. So what changed in perception?
And we certainly understand how hypocritical that Schedule 1 is, because now the government has recognized that there are medicinal benefits to the CBD component of the cannabis plant, which still is a Schedule 1 drug according to the Controlled Substances Act, which was 1973 under Tricky Dicky.
Yeah, so for people that don't know, in order to be a Schedule 1 drug, it has to have no medicinal value. And
Oops.
The federal government has already issued statements. It does have medicinal value. We've done studies. They have a patent on it if you want to get into that.
That's right.
So to say, basically that's been one of the tenets of people trying to get it legalized is, look, that it doesn't fit your own definition, and you've said this. So it can't be that because it's not the definition.
Right.
Again, we're still sitting here in 2019 trying to get it off Schedule 1. So
and I will say this, and in my news dabs, which is the weekly video news that I get to produce out of the Pro Cannabis Media studios here.
Beautiful here.
God, it sounds
view of the ocean.
Yeah, it's really. Oh my goodness gracious, we have all the best views. It's incredible, isn't it?
360.
Yeah. Anyway, the Department of Agriculture descheduled cannabis/hemp last week.
Yes.
And allowed interstate commerce of hemp to go across state lines, because since they passed that farm bill in December, they really did not define exactly what that meant. Now they've clarified it a little bit.
So that's Mitch McConnell. He got it passed for the Kentucky
tobacco farmer.
Right, for the hemp people. And what was happening is Kentucky can grow a monster amount of this hemp and cannabis when the time comes. Their truckers were trying to get it out to production facilities, and they were getting arrested. They were getting stopped in other states.
At the state line.
And they were trying to explain how the male hemp plant is different from the female marijuana plant.
Right.
Wasn't going well. So Mitch McConnell actually leaned on the agriculture and said, look, you can't be pulling over my truckers and arresting them. Let's get something done at least. So they did.
You are the first person, and I've had a lot of people in here who understand the difference between hemp, and I don't like to use the M word, but in this case, marijuana, the cannabis plant that has more than 0.3 THC in it, okay, as well as CBD, because CBD is in both products. But you're the first one who explained hemp is male and marijuana is female. Now, does that go across? Is that accurate? Because I have planters and growers that I can explain it better, but the other first one that brought that up, and I think that's a simple explanation.
So it's not quite as simple, because the hemp plant is actually different from a male marijuana plant. So
Okay.
they're in the same family tree or cousins.
Yeah.
But the hemp plant is only male.
Only male.
Only male. There cannot be a female hemp plant.
There you go.
The marijuana plant can be male or female, and it's the female that has the higher THC.
It has the flowers.
Yes, it flowers,
It
correct.
has the flower. It flowers.
Right.
It's a flowery thing, and it's a
Exactly.
beautiful
It's a bud.
plant. It's a beautiful bud, and in fact, if you go onto the, I'm going to be a shameless plug here. Go onto the homepage of ProCannabisMedia.com, and you'll see a beautiful picture of a flower on that homepage.
That's a female.
That would be a female. And by the way, I am very comfortable admitting that I do believe that the females are the superior race since they can do something that we males can't do. And that is bear children.
Get us high. Oh, you're talking about real female. Sorry. Okay, sorry. I followed you to
They
that
can
last
drive us crazy.
curveball.
Yes, they can drive us crazy if you want. But certainly, they're here to stay, as is this plant now. And I really am amazed at how many women entrepreneurs have entered the cannabis space. I got to meet one of them at the Seed to Sales show that the NCIA put on back in February, Ashley Pacillo from 7 Point, or maybe it's Point 7 Consultants. But she was terrific. Turns out she's from Franklin, Massachusetts. I mean, again, the Massachusetts people understand how to turn opportunity into business.
And it is a really up and coming niche for women. There's We Grow, Woman Grow.
There's Caroline's.
Yes, there's a couple.
Caroline's
of
in Uxbridge, the only rec-only license ever distributed out there by the Cannabis Control Commission of Massachusetts. I love giving her a plug. I just think what she's done is great.
Yeah, no, it's definitely an opportunity because the niche and the legalization is so new. We don't have a old boys club that's 50 years old and it's just going to get passed down. Now, that doesn't say they don't face their challenges with that same element as big business comes in, but at least to start, especially in Massachusetts, there's a great emphasis on minority ownership and equality and women, that we can at least start out the gate with some level playing field for everybody.
Right. And I do give credit to our politicians a little bit, at least who are trying to get this moving and expunge some of the people that have been imprisoned for a long time for minimal amounts of possession. I mean, there's been some injustice out here for those people of color. And I really think it is time, and I give the politicians credit for trying to do this. But the realities of offering an opportunity to what amounts to an ex-con, the banks, you can't get a loan. It's just very difficult. And while you talk a good game, you say, hey, we want social equity. Hey, we want to give back. But we're also only in like the first year or so here in Massachusetts, and 11 states total. Illinois just went legal last week as well. First legislative initiative to bring cannabis into the legal adult use world, which is newsworthy in many ways because, as you know, New York and New Jersey couldn't get it done, even though their governors wanted it.
Correct. Yeah.
So back to the social equity programs. Are we ever going to get to the point? And Steve Hoffman, the commissioner, told me he wants this to come from the private sector. He wants the big farmers, the Tilrays of the world, and the conglomerates that own 3 or 4 dispensaries in each state, even though legally they only have 3 they're supposed to have, right?
Sure.
He wants them to show the initiative. Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years? And that's, by the way, this is only your opinion. I don't think you have a crystal ball. But where do you think we're going to be in 5 years?
I think depending on what the political landscape looks like in 2020, if Trump is reelected or a Democrat comes in, that answer will be determined to TBA. Because I think if a Democrat gets in and it's more progressive and liberal, I think you will see, kind of like they're doing in California now, where a certain amount of a tech board has to be women. So that movement will kind of come across the U.S., whereas I think if Trump gets reelected and things stay a little more conservative, you may not have that push for social equity.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting. Certainly, I don't like to use his name. I call him POTUS, okay, just for the record. And I think he's an investor in the industry. You cannot tell me that a guy that's been as shrewd a businessman as he has been he's invested somehow, some way, and not that we could ever get a look at his books or his tax returns to actually prove this. It's strictly my opinion. Just saying. Anyway, Are the lobbyists in Washington, do you think they're doing a good job? It's pretty remarkable to me what they've been able to accomplish.
I think we're going to have to hold that grade out until we see the Safe Banking Act, which should be coming up relatively quickly. It's gaining a lot of momentum. Even, is it Joe Kennedy here in Mass went from no marijuana to upside of the bill.
Right.
So everybody likes to get reelected, and this is running so strong. Not only with Democrats, I think it's in the 70 or 80%. Republicans are pushing mid-50s to 60%. Everybody wants this done, even if it's just at the level of letting legal cannabis companies just have bank accounts.
Right.
You don't want $1 million cash sitting in a van or in your store every night.
Right. And they're spinning it as a public safety issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Which it is.
Like even if you don't want cannabis legalized and you're a conservative, you also want people who are working at the store to be safe if your son and daughter or neighbors working there as well. So like they should be able to not have to send in wads of $100 bills to the IRS to pay their taxes, which they're doing.
Right.
And the IRS hates it. They've had to hire more people. They have to buy money counter, those machines. I think we can get to the point where whether or not you are for or pro cannabis, if it's legal in your state and you have the right licenses, you should be able to have a bank account, write a check, track the money, tax it. Everybody wins here, and we should be able to do that if we have some 37, 35 states. They need to have a business checking account.
Right. How difficult was it for you to open one?
I'm under a software company, so we actually don't fall under cannabis because we do some other software sites and stuff like that. And I don't touch the flower. So for those that don't know, the very first decision you make when you come to an investment is, do you want to touch the flower, which was riskier, certainly in the last 2 years. Now it's not as risky. Or do you want to do ancillary or pick and shovel type investments? Those guys, I believe, can get bank accounts. I mean, you're talking packaging, you're talking plastics makers.
Equipment.
Whereas if you touch the flower, that's where the red flags went up. No go.
And so here's my feeling. I think you're going to see federal decriminalization first. I do think the Safe Banking Act will pass in the next 30 days. And it's because when Barney Frank came to our booth during NECAN, and we were talking about it, and he goes, look, you want to get a simple little win. And opening the banks and allowing them to do banking is a simple win. And that's why you're seeing the momentum by the lobbyists being pushed down there, and they're getting over 200 votes now. And by the way, that's about 17 more votes in 2 weeks since I was down there, because the lobbyist that I talked to at that time, Becky Dansky, which is now available on In the Weeds on our variety of podcast distribution networks, she explained that they have a checklist, and they go right down that checklist. They know who's going to sign, who's going to say yes, and they want to bring about 300 signatures to the Senate. So when the Senate gets it, it's like, we really can't stop this, because they do respect true democracy. And I really believe that's what we're seeing at work here. People want it. And the people who elect those representatives are voicing their choice of, let's make this stuff legal, tax it, and let's move on. Because it's, is it an adult use product? 100%. Can it be abused? 100%. But you can also use it in moderation, and it can improve your life because of the endocannabinoid system now.
Absolutely. And one thing to watch out on that is I think it's up to about 12 Republicans are co-signing. And, of course, it's going to go to the Senate, which is Republican-controlled. But the interesting part is I believe there's 41 Senate seats up in 2020 for re-election. And, like 21 of them or 30 of them are Republican. And out of those Republicans, I think a good 15 or 18 are in legal medical marijuana, at least, if not full rec.
Right.
So they're going to be under pressure from their conservative constituency to maybe not vote for it or not help the movement. But in the same sense, their state is benefiting a lot. Their voters want it. They're getting new schools, new homeless shelters, putting it toward fixing roads. Again, this is a great idea because you can get away with voting for it as a conservative Republican without throwing your ring in the hat that I'm for medical and or recreational use. I just want safety. I want banking. I want our communities to be safe.
Right.
Wink, wink. I can vote for this and not get my user base really upset, at least my conservative user base.
It's funny, at dinner we were talking about the unnamed civil war that's going on in our country right now. And I don't want to get into philosophically about why that is and all that, but, read between the lines, guys. I'm from Massachusetts. Anyway, this is one of the few subjects that you can reach across the political line and get people to align themselves. And it's become a rallying point, really. It's maybe the last big thing that may happen under this current POTUS administration that both sides will pass.
So, yeah, again, we wrote an article about why didn't President Obama legalize this on the way out. And one of the points of the article after talking to lobbyists was, obviously Hillary was a heavy favorite even to win on election night, and that was going to be kind of a gift to the people when she needed it. And in this sense, there's almost a competition even among Republicans and Democrats to be the one to do it. I mean, of course, the Democrats want it, and they want to be able to champion, we legalize, we decriminalize, we took away the conviction arrest record of 1.2 million people because you need those back in the workforce, and they need to be able to vote, and they're able to get a job. But now it's almost like the Republicans know how in favor people are. They want to take credit. So there's actually a belief that Trump will do it before the election as a carrot or as a goodwill or as a look at me. I know what the people want, and he'll legalize it or executive order or whatever. And that the Republicans want to say we did it. We're smart. We see we're pro-business, jobs.
Right.
So we'll see. As long as somebody does it, I don't care. As long as it gets done, go for it.
Right. And when I get behind the curtain, I get to do whatever I want with my vote.
Yep.
Because a lot of people still won't admit that they may have actually voted this guy into office. I just want to say. Curt Dalton from the Cannabis.net. This has been great. I feel like I've met an old friend, and
Absolutely.
We have a lot in common. I hope we get a chance to continue to work together. I've enjoyed having you in studio, and I'm gonna go on record because we are being recorded here. I really expect you to end up doing a regular podcast with the Pro Cannabis Media Group because, after all, Cannabis.net is pro cannabis.
We are very much. I enjoyed my time. I look forward to doing some podcasts, keeping your listeners up to date on what's going on, and hopefully giving them some good advice.
That's right. And you don't think they should bring back Kyrie, huh?
No, not a Kyrie fan. It's hard if you're Wicked Danny to bring back a guy that 80% of your fans don't want. No matter how talented he is between the court lines.
And 2.5 years ago, they were dying to get rid of Isaiah and sign Kyrie. Did we remember this whole thing?
We hoodwinked him because Isaiah's hip's broken. He never played the right way, the same way again.
And yet his heart is so big. I mean, and he's a bargain, by the way. I mean, I would not put it by Danny to bring him back, to bring Isaiah back.
He'd be a bench guy, but
he'd be a bench guy, but he certainly would be a fan of the people. That's for sure.
We'll find out. The draft's in 13 days. We got a lot of draft picks, and Anthony Davis wants out. So we'll stay tuned, listeners.
That's right, because even though we are cannabis-based, there's a lot of sports influence here, especially in my mind. I love to make analogies like that. Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net, thank you so much for coming in today to our studios here. A reminder that In the Weeds is available on the C-Suite Network, on clnsmedia.com. It's also on Spotify, Stitcher, and iTunes. And you might even find it soon on iHeartRadio because I think we are no longer under consideration. I think we've been accepted, which is good. And of course, a video file has been created that you can watch on the WeedTube and now the Pro Cannabis Media YouTube channel, which is also where we release our weekly news video called Cannabis News Dabs with Jimmy Young. So for Curt Dalton, I'm your host of In the Weeds, Jimmy Young. And remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Revolutionary Clinics is just one of 49 medical cannabis dispensaries in Massachusetts, but there's a reason why it's one of the most popular. It's their patient-first philosophy. All day long, they teach, they educate, they communicate about this complicated plant called cannabis sativa. That's true whether you visit their Cambridge location in Fresh Pond at 110 Fawcett Street or at 67 Broadway in Somerville. Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first. This podcast is produced by the Pro Cannabis Media Group out of Boston, Massachusetts, for the enjoyment and education of our audience. Any medical advice or opinions shared are not a reflection of the Pro Cannabis Media management or any of the In the Weeds distributors, including CLNS Media and C-Suite Network.